Heyo! How you doing this evening, folks? Good to see you all. Kyle, it's good to see you too, my friend. How are you?
G'day, g'day.
Well, we those of you who know. So we're gonna skip the preamble because Kyle, as I understand it, you have a man down, and we don't want to pin you down for too terribly long. But welcome to the live stream, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and thank you again for your support. We'll have some more crazy talk, I think, at the end, but we want to leave plenty of time for Kyle to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight, which is, of course, the great and mighty Runequest from Chaosium Games.
No. First, we have to talk about a little milestone that was reached.
Indeed, it was. I didn't want to pave over you there again, with time being of the essence for you tonight. But if you're just coming to the stream and you didn't see the impromptu flailing about that I did earlier on video, we have reached 1,000 subscribers, 1,001 to be exact. Somebody had to jump in there and just bump us up just a little bit more. So it's 1,001. A YouTube oddity is what has occurred, and I couldn't be happier about that. I was honestly thinking, I gotta be 100% honest, man. I was thinking like Saturday, when I was doing the anniversary live stream. You're going to be there for some of that, right?
Probably not on Saturday. No, I'll watch some of it, but I won't. I won't be a participant.
Okay,
because that's my Sunday. That's a work day for me.
Oh, I understand. But if I will send you the link if you want to pop in, because 12 hours, dude. 12 hours. Oh, okay. We went black, and I was worried there for a second. So yes, we hit 1,000 subs today, 1,001 subs, and thank you to everybody who made it happen. Thank you to my handsome and talented co-host. It's in no small part to Kyle and his efforts. And guys, let me tell you, if there's anything that is production-wise sharp on this program when Kyle's on, it's because of Kyle. That's just that is just the truth. That is just the absolute immutable truth. He goads me along to not just completely do things in a slack ass way, and it pays off because we get good product out of it, and I couldn't be happier about that. So this Saturday will not only celebrate the milestone of the second year of this televised fiasco that I do, but we'll also talk more about the coming of the GUOGC. The GUOGC is coming, and it's firm now. It is the GUOGC is firm.
Well, if we just take out the word game, if we just make it the great underground online convention, then we can talk about guacamole.
Yes, exactly.
And for the 12 hours, people can sit eating tacos or something. I don't know.
I don't have a problem with this. Eating tacos all day is, just sit here with some Presidente or even something like some tequila tacos. But anyway, we'll talk about that. Thank you to everyone who's helped make this happen. Announcements are coming soon on when the con is going to happen, when Kyle will be running games. I will be running games. Paul Stormberg will be here running games. We've got other people stepping up to run games. And I'm not just brushing you aside, folks, by saying other people, because there's so many people that have stepped up to run games. I'm actually going to have to organize this, Kyle. I can't just throw this together. I may need your help. You may have to bring that producer shit to the forefront again. But anyway,
just organize a schedule and then very loosely stick to it.
Yeah,
nothing's ever perfectly stuck to with gamers. I mean,
exactly.
We're not the most reliable bunch.
We are not. We are not at all. But like clockwork, let's see, you have a lovely fighter lady there trying not to get nommed on by a lizard, and above that it says Runequest. So Kyle, tell us a little bit about Runequest.
Okay. So Runequest is a game that came out a little bit after original D&D. So the producers of it felt that the base of D&D, this is just going on interviews and things years later, the base of the D&D was really good, but they wanted it to be more realistic. And realism, of course, means more details. So, you've got hit locations and things like that.
We'll show that Gary Gygax what a good role-playing game is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going by sales, it was the second most popular.
Sure.
For quite some time, for the better part of a decade after that. Now, the original publication date of RuneQuest is 1978, which puts it at the same time as AD&D, first edition. And in fact, the first RuneQuest creature book came out just a few months before the Monster Manual did.
Really?
They deliberately tried to pip them at the post.
Nice.
I don't imagine it made any difference. I don't think there was like game masters sitting out there and they're like, "Oh, it's in the stores, man. I won't wait for the D&D one. I'll just go and get this one and convert them all." Because they would have spent the next 3 months trying to convert the creatures anyway. So, yeah. Now, people nowadays, when they hear RuneQuest, they typically think Greg Stafford. But if you look at it, you see, there's we've got two different editions here. So we've got the. Let me add that to the stream then.
Sure.
So we've got so we've got on the cover there, that will probably be the second edition. Okay, so what I've got here in my hands is the first edition. First and second edition have no real differences. There's just some various errata. Actually, so I've got the second edition because it's got the errata here on the inner cover. On the first edition, I think that was just blank or had credits or something. Anyway, so various printings say RuneQuest by Steve Perrin and Ray Turney. And this one just says by Steve Perrin and friends. Okay. But on the side of this thing, it says by Perrin, Turney, and friends.
Let me hang on, Scott. Let me see if I can bring you to focus. Nope,
no, that won't work.
Damn it.
But anyway, it says on the spine of this one.
Okay.
Perrin, Turney, and friends.
I gotcha.
But they were big on giving credit where credit was due. So this one says by Steve Perrin, Ray Turney, Steve Henderson, Warren James, with editing and special sections by John Sapienza and Greg Stafford. So essentially the rule stuff was all those guys. Like Steve Perrin was big into the Society for Creative Anachronism, and he did lots of that biffo stuff that they do.
Right.
So it was him who came up with the combat system, as far as we can tell. He unfortunately died August last year.
I remember hearing that.
And in the obituary that Chaosium put up, they said that the work on RuneQuest started on Independence Day in 1976. So they spent a year or two, obviously, crafting it and play testing it before putting it out there. So that's one of the remarkable things about D&D, that basically it was like a dam breaking or something, that once those guys put it out there, everyone else started coming up with their own little versions of things, whether it be Classic Traveller or RuneQuest or Tunnels and Trolls or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Hey, now, Kyle, not to natter with details, who did that cover art? That is striking and beautiful cover art.
Well, we'll get to that. So
okay, great.
Illustrations by Louise Perrin.
Lovely.
Steve Perrin's wife.
That's awesome. It's a beautiful piece of artwork, and the wife did it. That's very cool.
Yeah. Now, on the inner page, let's see if it shows up in the PDF version. PDF version's made years later, so yeah. So you'll be able to see there.
Mm-hmm.
Dedicated to Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, who first opened Pandora's box, and to Ken St. Andre, who found it could be opened again.
That's great. And of course, for those of you who might not know, Ken St. Andre is responsible for Tunnels and Trolls, which is a contemporary of original Dungeons and Dragons, and has gone through, I think, 8 editions now. It's still out there. You can still pick up Tunnels and Trolls. Maybe we'll take a look at it on the show one day. But it's very nice to see them right out of the box say, hey, thanks, guys.
Yeah, I think there are many fields. Role-playing is one of them. This fitness stuff behind me is another, where too often people become kind of gurus in it.
Mm-hmm.
Big fish in that little pond, and they and all their followers don't really give enough credit to those who've come before them. But these guys did right at the start.
Excellent.
They did right at the start. You know, I mean, many of the fans will be hammer and tongs with each other, but the guys who actually produce the stuff, they tend to be a bit more friendly and give credit to one another.
Right on.
Yeah, and then they thank their play testers. But I'd just like to draw attention to the cover art for a moment. As Bill said, it's good cover art. It's a striking picture. Mm-hmm. Shows you what the game is about. You've got a warrior fighting a monster. So it shows you what the game's about. But there's something similar in the later edition. So first and second edition, as I said, they just kind of changed. They just kind of changed. They did errata and so on.
Mm-hmm.
This edition, the deluxe edition, which is the third edition, which was a box one, also has something similar. They both have got a woman warrior on them.
Nice.
And this is something which we've talked about before, how you can be inclusive without being obnoxious about it. You don't necessarily have to have this whole big long screed in your game about being inclusive. You don't need to have endless blog posts about it. You don't need to abuse people on Twitter or anything like that. All you have to do is put it in the cover art. You put those people in, because most people, it won't occur to them that they're excluded from something unless they're told that they're excluded. But even if it does occur to them that they're excluded, if they see themselves represented in the art, just doing heroic things,
mm-hmm.
then they'll go ahead and they'll go, oh yeah. You know, so there's not really any doubt right from the start. We're going to have all sorts playing. And of course the art was done by a woman. So,
and you know, not to stray too far out into the minefield, but I do want to point out, I have said many times, I've read it on the show many times, I've used it as copy pasta many times, the full paragraph in the player's handbook where Mike Carr talks about the diversity of D&D players and how they come from all over, and how the game counts women as both dungeon masters and players, you know, as a considerable percentage. And, you know, as much as a certain group likes to tar a lot of us older folks as being knuckle dragging misogynists or whatever, phobes, however you want to say it, you know, Mike, Runequest art, warrior women, D&D talks about diversity. we didn't like tear our chest tear out and or tear our hair out and thump on our chests and flip out about it back then, because it wasn't, as you say, there wasn't a big deal about it. It was just like, look, here it is.
Yeah, come sit down and play. I hope you brought snacks.
Exactly. I hope you brought snacks.
It's like when there was those horrible incidents of people being shot by police and so on, and riots and everything afterwards. And there are all these gyms out there who are doing, black squares on the Instagram and so on. And some acquaintances asked me, are you going to do the same thing? And I said, no, my gym membership is my diversity statement. And my gym membership includes people from all kinds of ethnic backgrounds. It mostly reflects the demographics of the local area, and the local area's got Australian-born Chinese and the more recent wave of migrants from South Asia, from India and Sri Lanka and so on. So there's lots of those people, and they've got people of diverse sexualities, and that it doesn't really come up much in lifting weights, so we don't discuss it much. But yeah, so it just reflects the demographics of the local area. It wasn't a deliberate attempt to make the gym diverse. It's just who lives in the area and wants to get strong. And I saw that too, pre all the lockdown stuff, ruining the game clubs. But all the open game tables, that was exactly the same too. It was in the central city, and we had there's a lot of universities in central city, Melbourne University, Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology University, and so on. And the young students are from quite diverse backgrounds. So basically it was uni students. That's the backbone historically of role-playing game groups.
Yep.
High school students and uni students. We didn't meet the high school ones because we're playing in the evenings and stuff, but we certainly met the uni ones. So that's what it was. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about role-playing games, because you're playing somebody other than yourself. Who yourself is doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
Because it's a role-playing game. It's and if you play you can play someone much like yourself if you want, but you don't want to make yourself as a character. That way, it's rather depressing to the ego.
I would never want to make me as a stat like strength 4, wisdom 8, int 9, charisma. Well, I got a few followers on YouTube. I got to at least give myself a charisma 9. I will say
I would definitely fall into that. Here or lower, the character can only be a thief or whatever, and then you go and look up what's required for the thief, and you find you don't meet that either. So you don't meet the requirements to be any character class. You're zero level forever.
I will give myself a high dex, and I'll tell you why. I was holding my youngest daughter. I was standing in the kitchen one day, phone wedged under my ear, talking to my mom. I was holding my youngest daughter. She was an infant at the time, which is much easier than when they're teenagers. And she wriggled out of my grasp and pushed herself away. In my right hand was one of those plastic grocery bags. They're slippery as hell. And I had picked it up off the floor because I didn't want to slip on it. And I reached out with my right hand because it's my dominant hand. And I grabbed her by the back of her jumper, and she was upside down. Just in a split second, she was out of my arms. And just... So I don't know if you want to call that a high dex or a great saving throw or whatever. So I'll give myself, I'll give myself that. So,
well, most of us wouldn't make great adventurers.
No.
Anyway, but
I would dare say you're a ranger, but we can have that discussion later.
Ricky says you can never fully escape yourself psychologically. I think that's probably true, but I mean, it's also true that even the best actors out there, your Sir Laurence Olivier's and all the rest, they have a distinctive voice. It's when it's that actor. And they have certain mannerisms and ways of moving that you will recognize even through a whole lot of makeup and all the rest. You know, like we know it's Billy Crystal in Princess Bride as the old as the old guy making the pills and stuff. You know, we know it's Billy
Max,
Crystal,
Miracle Max.
That's the one. So he's got a lot of makeup, but we still know it's him. So yeah, it's true you can never escape yourself totally. But on the other hand, as I said, you know, you are still playing a different character who, at the very least, can take different courses of action that you wouldn't.
Indeed.
That you wouldn't be courageous enough to, or you know, you courageous not in the sense of just in the sense of personal safety, but it's because role-playing games like reality don't have a save game for you to go back to if you mess everything up. So you have to make the best of it. And that takes real courage to go ahead and do those things. I mean, not to say role-playing games are real courage, but you know what I mean. It's a different thing compared to that. Anyway, so RuneQuest has what is a fantasy role-playing game? Character acts a role in a fantasy environment, blah, blah, blah. It just has this one short paragraph. So we've talked before about game systems describing what is a role-playing game and how D&D doesn't describe it at all, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as you get the next game coming along, they feel the need to put in a paragraph. And as the years go on, this becomes pages and pages telling people how to do it. And yeah, I just don't think it's really necessary. I think you could have nixed that paragraph and you wouldn't have lost anything. People have got the idea.
Yeah.
How to use these rules. Read these rules very carefully. Read all the way through once. Is there anyone who does that? Is there anyone who reads the entire game book before sitting down to play?
Oh Lord, no! I've never read a role-playing game beginning to end. I think we're probably all guilty of buying a new role-playing game, taking it to the game that night, and everybody just kind of struggling through it.
Yeah, we've all done that. And I mean, famously, the Dungeon Master's Guide for AD&D is the one where you're always picking up things that you never noticed before.
Yes.
Even after having it, you know, even after having read it cover to cover, but in dribs and drabs over years. Yes, Ricky, it is an interesting view into the philosophy of the game creators, of what the role-playing game is. But yeah, I don't care about their philosophy. It's my game now. As soon as I take it home from the store, it's my game, and I don't care what the game designers wanted.
Just so.
Okay, so yeah, so what I wanted to say on the authorship of it was that Perrin and Tony and other guys did the rules, and Greg Stafford did the background, that whole Glorantha thing, Bronze Age, except bronze is mined directly from the ground, and the ducks and all that. That was all Greg Stafford. So it's kind of interesting how in people's minds, Greg Stafford has become more prominent over the years, more associated with RuneQuest. And that's also to do with, if you look on Wikipedia, you can make your way through the maze of intellectual property and how, like, the RuneQuest system, the system went over here, and then the Glorantha went over there, and then the names for some of the Glorantha things went over there, so that they made Hero Quest, and then they lost the rights to the Hero Quest name, and so they had to rename it Hero Wars. And then when Mongoose did their edition of RuneQuest, they had to rewrite it so that they could have the same system but in different words and blah, blah, blah. So you can go into all that. And I mean, it's like we've discussed about Traveller. It's had multiple editions, which are all substantially the same. Really. Yeah.
I do want to interject real quick that it took a supreme titanic effort of will when you mentioned Hero Quest to not launch into the Bardic Broadcast spiel about the Hero Quest board game. You're welcome, everyone. Hero Quest is nope. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
So here you see Stafford's writing, Glorantha was created by its deities from the primal void of chaos. At first, there was no history for the initial blah, blah, blah.
So we get a baked in campaign world right there from the start. There is no, this is your broad sheet to color in as you like, huh?
Yeah, and here's the map.
Yay, it's not fantasy Earth. Awesome.
So, yeah, and it goes on. Blah, blah, blah. Technological base. It's a Bronze Age world. Bronze is common and can be mined directly from the bones of the gods who died in the Gods' War. So, yeah, it's just bronze-colored iron, really. Purpose of the game, which is really not another what is a role-playing game section. Equipment needed to play. The usual dice, right? So they wanted to get away from D&D, but they still use all the different dice.
Right, yeah.
They still use all the polyhedrals. And they tell you that you should have some figurines.
Was it? Do you know if there was ever an official RuneQuest miniatures line?
I believe there was, but not at this stage, not in the late 70s.
Okay.
Because as I said, it's just so... There's so much back and forth with all the editions and the company split-offs with KOs selling rights to Avalon Hill and blah, blah, blah. So,
right.
So, creating a character. These stats might look familiar. Strength, intelligence. Okay. And then there's constitution, dexterity, and charisma. They've got a couple of ones that aren't in D&D, though. Power.
Mm-hmm.
The character's ability to work magic, also a measure of his soul. High power shows the favor of the gods, allowing an adventurer to hit easier, defend himself, and otherwise excel, for he is in tune with the universe. Of course, a high power detracts from an adventurer's ability to skulk around in shadows and remain unobtrusive, for the aura of power draws attention.
Nice. Now, for those of you who followed our Let's Play and Let's Read Call of Cthulhu we did a few weeks ago, if this all sounds very familiar, it's because this is the start of the BRP, the basic roleplay system.
Yeah.
That is the engine of many Chaosium games. Please continue, Kyle.
Yeah. There was also Stormbringer, famously. They did Stormbringer. And then there's... size, the mass of a character affects your ability to do and absorb damage. So as you'll see later, your hit points and a possible hit bonus are dependent on your strength and size. So now, yes, the saga of Rurik the Restless. So something they did here in this edition, and also in the third edition, third edition, it was Cormac the Pict, but he was Rurik the Restless, a sort of a Viking type of dude. Okay. Is that they illustrated the rules with examples showing that character, and it's sort of like telling the story of that particular character, but at the same time giving you the rules. Which I think is quite a cool thing. A number of early games did that. It doesn't seem to be so much popular now. As a side note, I in my initial draft of Conflict, which Bill would have seen, I did that with an example character, Lena Spence, but there wasn't really room just in those 48 pages to do that and to put all the rules. And also, because of the physical size of the book, when you put in two columns, like on those charts, things start to get a bit cramped.
Well, perhaps in the deluxe hardback edition of Conflict.
Well, there's a couple of example ones. Example: Corporal McCarver on leave pashes the wrong bloke in the bar, and his girlfriend, the slapper Ginger, decides to sort her out in the ladies. So that was a combat example. But that little example then takes up a quarter of that page. So it's kind of a design decision. If you do want to have a smaller book, then you've got less room to put in whatever, whether it be examples or charts or illustrations or whatever. If you want to have a restricted number of pages or a restricted size. If you're going to go for the full-on modern coffee table book with 1,000 pages, you can put whatever you like in there.
Right.
But they still don't seem to put the character examples. I think it's nice, and it adds a kind of a charm to a game system. Or reading on your initial read through, if you're following this character, you could start thinking, what you'll get. Now they're not very clear, but your characteristics is you roll 3d6 for everything except for size and intelligence, and then it's 2d6 plus 6.
Well, I can see where that would appeal to you as a player, Kyle.
Well, yeah, the stats are actually slightly more important in Runequest than they are in D&D.
Yeah, there you do get you do get a fair amount of figured elements out of your stats in the BRP system.
Yeah. So we've got here the attack. The ability to attack is the ability to strike an opponent, blah, blah, blah. Not just one stroke, a combination of blows, feints, and shifts intended to make an opponent open himself up and be killed. Does this sound familiar, like with D&D? It's not just...
A little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so all the skills are percentile, but you get a base to help you along. And it adds up. So strength, low strength hinders, high strength helps. Intelligence also helps in attack. Power also helps, and dexterity helps and hinders. So yeah, if your characteristic is 1 to 4, you get this -5, -10, whatever. Characteristic is 13 to 16 plus 5%, and so on. So you'd look it up on the chart. And then they've got the reasons why. So immense strength helps the attacker move his weapon faster and brush aside another's parry. Intelligence has more influence on how well a character can attack because it aids him in seeing an opponent's weaknesses and working out new combinations and moves and so on. So it's a few percent here and there. So yeah, Rurik Saga. Remember Rurik? Checking the table against Rurik's rolled abilities, we find that his int of 16 neatly cancels out the dex of 6, giving Rurik no bonus in attacking. So he's clumsy, but he's smart, so balances out. So it lets you think of his fighting style as being more about being smart than being dexterous, but the net effect is no effect on play. It's exactly the same as if both stats were 10. And then there's parry. Okay. They split up attack and parry.
Okay.
They're different skills. So, and it's a similar thing. Okay. Hit points. Hit points are a measure of how much damage one can take before dying, based directly on con, modified by power and size. Character's roll for con is equal to the number of his hit points, modified as follows. So, yeah, so 1 to 4, 5 to 8, same 4-level categories, and then power and size. So you start with your con, say con of 10, and then it's modified up and down by power and size.
Okay.
The more powerful and the bigger guys have more hit points. Damage of done, you could do bonus damage if your size and strength are big. It adds dice to your damage, 1d4, 1d6. And then there's stealth, perception, manipulation. These are all skills. They're just not listed as skills. They're going through in order.
Okay.
So that you can write them out on your character sheet and do it in order 8 manipulation. So if you look carefully at this, you'll notice like you've got some Arial type font in the main text, and then these charts are a typewriter. And I would not be at all surprised if it was literally a dude on a typewriter.
No, I can believe it. They typed the charts out on their Selectric or their Winchester, and then handed them to the printer and said, "These go here. Paste these up in here."
Yeah, because it was the late 1970s, so they didn't have I don't know, what was the first word processing stuff? Something on Apple, probably.
The first word processors, you pushed the wrong button there, Kyle. Probably would have been Wang systems, massive desk-sized suckers, green screen terminal, 8-inch floppy disks. But what the guys there could have afforded, it would have been something running on like a Commodore PET or a very early Apple II.
Mm-hmm. So there's all those skills, and then they've got the picture of Rurik and signed Louise as well for interest.
Mm-hmm.
People's interest. Enhancing characteristics. Basic training in Glorantha, 400 lunars a week for 8 hours a day. That's part of Stafford's influence on the game. It's not lunars. So in this, it was lunars because of the setting baked in. Mm-hmm. In this, the setting was less baked in, so it became pennies.
Okay.
But anyway, so there's money. You could spend money and time to improve your stats. It costs a lot, but it costs a lot and takes a lot of time, but you can do that. And then they've got other things. They play into each other. So each 25% skill with oratory learned increases the character's charisma by 1 point. You become a better speaker, so they, present yourself better from your public speaking tours. Become a motivational speaker.
Exactly.
Yeah. So so this is fairly typical of first edition of one of the more popular games, that you have stats play into skills, which play into stats, and then back and forth. And usually a second or later edition will be a bit kind of smoothed out, because what happens is that they send a thing out there and thousands of people play it, and then somebody finds the game exploits.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, charisma helps my oratory, and oratory helps my charisma, so I'm just going to max them out, and then no one will ever disagree with me.
Just put them in a feedback loop. Yeah.
Yeah. Because players will find that. They'll find those rorts. It's like
yes, they will. It's what
it's like
they
sitting
do.
down with your tax accountant. He's going to find the ways.
Now, if this is, yeah. Like I said when I was telling people why there was no grand post or story about the last couple of weeks of the Monday Night AD&D games, it's because we've been going through literally 11 people sitting for 90 minutes, no more than that, a full 3 hours, dividing up treasure, who's going to get the magic sword, who's going to get the book that raises intelligence, okay, who needs the potion, and so on. And it's those nights when the A stands for accounting in AD&D.
Okay, so starting equipment. All beginning characters can be expected to come with the following equipment: clothing, equipment, belt knife, fire making gear, and then depending on the background, peasant, townsman, barbarian, poor noble. They're different things. You have to be at least a poor noble to have any armor to start with. So you've got a background chart: peasant, townsman, barbarian, poor noble, or a rich noble.
Now I notice you're not talking about elf, dwarf, halfling, half orc, half elf kind of thing.
It's all human. The basic setting for
Runequest
is
all
human, except later on that horrendous Glorantha edition with ducks.
Oh God! Yeah. Now I know next to nothing about Runequest, but I do know about the ducks, Duck Tower. The Duck Lord, all that. It was funny one time, guys.
Yeah.
Funny one time.
Yeah. And here's their character sheet. So again, obviously typed up, and I like the little figure that you've got in the corner there.
Oh God, do we now in this? I've talked about BRP and Call of Cthulhu. I've not really cracked a glance at Runequest. Do they do damage by location? Because
Yes,
I
they
see.
do.
Oh.
Yep. So
I was enjoying it so much up to this point. Okay, break it.
So they've got the head, the arms, chest, abdomen, and each leg. And it's broken up by there's a percentage sort of thing. And then they've got an example character. Somebody obviously just rolled it up and then wrote it up. As you said, they handed it to the printer because this isn't Rurik. This is Dugan, the townsman, with his strength of 17. So he's got a total hit points. If you lose hit points equivalent to that location on that location becomes useless. So if it's your head or your chest, you just fall unconscious. But also, if you take an accumulation of small amounts of hit points all across your body, which equals to your total hit points, in this case 15, that also makes you unconscious. You're just generally battered into unconsciousness. Mm-hmm. In my experience playing the game, it was very rare for that to happen, for people to hit their total hit points accumulated from small wounds. Because, so for example, when you look at this guy using his poleaxe, doing 3d6 plus 1d4, he's got a good strength and size. He's strength 17, size 13. His short sword, 1d6 plus 1 plus 1d4. So you look at that, and then you see that he's got like 4 hit points on his arms. It's like, yeah, it's not a matter of just getting battered into unconsciousness unless somebody's slapping you. You know, it's,
right.
And they have to slap your face and then slap your arm, because if they just keep repeatedly slapping one limb, then you'll eventually lose the use of that limb. So, yeah. And the bow does 1d6 plus 1. So, yeah, in practice, somebody will get a crippled limb, or they'll get a strike on the head, chest, or abdomen, and they're out.
Brutal.
So it's relatively easy and quick for them to go out. And again, this comes from Perrin's experience in doing a Society for Creative Anachronism, where, you know, I mean, I know they've changed the rules heaps of times over the decades, but they'll often have something like you can take one strike on a limb and 2 strikes on your trunk or something like that. They'll have that kind of system going on. They don't usually break it up by weapon type though. So whether you get struck by a short sword or a poleaxe, it's
right.
It's the same deal. But I mean,
But Kyle, it's important I know if my character was shot with 5.56 or 5.45. They're 2 completely different bullets, Kyle.
Yeah, well, you know, there's that, but you could sort of see maybe short sword versus poleaxe. You could see that kind of thing.
Sure, yeah,
but,
yeah.
But on the other hand, there's Society for Creative Anachronism, historical reenactment group. They're not interested. Like nowadays, you've got HEMA, the historical European martial arts guys, and they've gone right back into like all the instructional manuals and stuff from 1236 or whatever,
right?
To try to reproduce the moves and things that people have done. I don't believe there was much of that available in the 1970s and earlier.
Yeah.
So they just had their kind of experimenting with things, and there would have been other considerations as well, because if you're dressed up as Sir Kyle or whatever, you know, you want to just take what you think is cool.
Yeah.
You don't want to have to worry about, you know,
right.
And maybe, you know, you can get somebody to make a short sword for you, but you can't get somebody to make a long sword for you. And
yeah, I think that the important thing to focus on in situations like that, though, is the sword, short, long, poignard, whatever, because ultimately when you're talking about pole arms, I mean, they're just effectively the same. It's just a long stick for hitting a guy with, you know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to trigger one of our audience members, by the way.
Yeah, one thing, like I said, you can argue about how much difference it would have made in reality. But in terms of, as I said, Perrin was coming from the experience of doing the SEA stuff. So he, and there were other considerations there. You know, the SCA wasn't necessarily trying to make a realistic combat system. They were trying to enjoy the cut and thrust and parry of being up there and being hit with the foam sword or the wooden sword or whatever. You know,
I will mention two things before we get too far off the topic here. One is that in The Princess Bride, when Wesley and Inigo are fighting each other on the cliffside, they're bantering back and forth about these books of swordplay that they've read. It was literally just last year or the year before that I found out those are real books on studies of swordplay. You can go find, it's a public domain book because it was written during the 1400s. But if you want to read about Capoferro, there's a book out there. The books they're talking about are real. And the other one is I did have a large circle of players at my table years ago who were all SEA fighters. And, you know, when we were talking about the melee in D&D, this is shit my D&D Dungeon Master's Guide said territory. When you're in 3 abreast combat, shields up, you've got your spearmen or your pikemen or what have you behind you, and you're fighting in melee combat, you don't, Gary said, you don't pick your target. You're just flailing. You're just, you know, trying to hit somebody in front of you. And it's up to you, the DM, to decide who they hit. And I was mentioning this to my group, and it was hearty Viking laughter. Because here were guys who, when they weren't playing D&D with me on the weekends, they were going out and beating on each other with rattan swords. And they're like, absolutely not. We really can hit the people we want to, not just a random person on the other side of the shield wall. If I want to bop Wallace on the head, I'm going to bop Wallace on the head, not just swing my sword and try and hit. So anyway, back to RuneQuest.
G'day, Hickey. Welcome to the show. Hope to see you online sometime. I got a new game on PS5, but I'll have more to talk about that after this stuff. Okay, time. A meaningful campaign cannot be had without. No, hang on. That's DMG.
Yeah, that's. You almost had me going there. I'm like, wow, did he just copy the? Oh
no. So there's a game week. Yeah, the authors recommend a scale of 1 real day equaling 1 game week. Simplifies bookkeeping and lets players keep characters and play fairly continuously. That was yeah, I mean, that plays into the whole D&D thing of training time. You know, if the game is going on while your character is training up and they're adventuring up. Or what we were discussing the other day, there was a guy talking about the basic living cost that your character is meant to have of 100 gold per month per level. So, and they said, this guy was saying he imposed it on his group even if the player was absent. So if you've got a 4th level character and the player doesn't show up this week and 4 weeks go by in game, when the player does show up, you say your character owes 1,600 gold.
Yep.
It would and I think it would act to really sort people out whether they wanted to play in the game. Because if you miss enough game sessions, your character's going to be in hideous debt. Or broken, living on the streets, you know.
Yeah.
You come back to the village of Homlet and you find Jim the fighter lying in a gutter, kicked out of the inn because he's broke.
Begging for scraps of giant crayfish to eat.
Yeah, he sold his arms and armor. He now just has a chair leg.
Well, that's why you have to buy arms and armor for your hirelings in AD&D. They've squandered it all. You have to buy them equipment.
So, yeah, anyway, full turn. This term is far less optional. Full turn represents 5 minutes or 25 melee rounds. And the melee round is 12 seconds long. I don't know why. I don't know why 12 seconds. It seems fairly arbitrary. It's the only game system I know is 12 seconds, where they just like riffing off AD&D with 6-second segments, or what. I don't know how they settled on 12 seconds. I know it's all arbitrary in the end, but
right.
I just found it oddly specific. But so is the D&D segment of 6 seconds. Movement. There's daily movement, walking movement. You can walk 20 kilometers a day. I'm glad they have more realistic ones, like we were talking about GURPS having the basic movement of 50 miles a day. Cavalry movement, blah, blah, blah. Human movement, armored man can move 8 movement units in a melee round. Yeah, movement. I don't find that sort of stuff interesting, so I'm not going to dwell on it. Sorry, guys. Okay, melee round. Combat.
All right.
First phase, statement of intent. This is something that Runequest did. Not many games have done since. The games I've played where they did have it, usually everyone forgot to do it. Yeah, the players and referee formally state what their respective participants in the melee will be doing.
Now, I enforce that in AD&D. Anyone who's played with me on Tuesday nights, which we have a few in, I'm very much, let's get statements of intent, and you're locked into it. So I'm glad RuneQuest enforces that. Yeah,
so, well, the interesting thing is they don't specify it in this edition, but they do in the 3rd edition. So you have strike ranks, which is the order that you go in. It's sort of a mini initiative thing, and affected by your dexterity and your armor and so on. It'll get into it a little bit later. You have strike ranks, but you give your statement of intent in reverse order to strike ranks. So the guy who acts first also decides what he's going to do last. The guy who's going to act last in the round also has to decide first what he's going to do. So the guy who acts first not only has the advantage of acting first, he also has the advantage of knowing what everyone else is going to do.
Ah, okay, that jives. That makes a degree of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's part of having a good strike rank, that you're that guy, which in conflict was expressed a bit in terms of readiness. You've got that guy who looks around and he knows exactly what everyone's going to do because he's experienced and competent and so on. So yeah, they don't specify it in this version, but they do in later versions. During the course of this melee round, the intentions may be aborted. Okay, since the troll ducked out the door, I won't shoot an arrow at him, but not altered. Okay, since the troll ducked out the door, I'll shoot at the dragon newt. So yeah, you can cancel your action, but you can't change your action.
Okay.
Strike rank is explained fully on pages following. If one opponent disables another before the other can attack, the victim gets no attack at all, as you expect. So this kind of resolves. I mean, maybe they couldn't understand AD&D initiative either. Before Addict was written.
Yeah, God bless
the 12
him.
pages of simplifying things.
Yeah.
And then they do attack, and defense, and roll for hit location, and damage, and so on. So, explanation of strike rank. In any combat, someone is going to have the edge, chance of striking first and setting the pattern for the combat. In Runequest, the strike rank determines who shall have the first chance to strike a telling blow. So they've got a chart of what you do. So having a small size gives you a higher strike rank.
Really?
Yeah, and
interesting.
You have to strike rank. It's literally rank as in number 1 goes first, number 2 goes second, number 3 goes third, and so on. Right? So,
okay. All right.
Okay, so a big size. So they're believers in in reach.
Okay.
You know,
I got
so
you now.
There's
That
always an
clarifies.
argument: what's more important, is it reach, or can you be the little dexterous guy with the short weapon who jumps in there? Runequest comes down on the side of the guys with the big reach.
Okay.
You know, as the enemy comes in, we strike them with our pole arm, that kind of thing. So high dexterity. So like spell or missile is a 0, size of 22 plus is 0, and then size of 1 to 6 is 3, and so on. And then dexterity of 19 to 24 is strike rank 0, down to dexterity of 1 to 5 is 5. And then a 2 meter long weapon is strike rank 0, and a 0 to 0.4 meter weapon like a knife is strike rank 4. So as an example, if you're a big guy, size 15 to 21, you'd have strike rank 1.
Okay.
And if you had average dexterity 9 to 12, there'd be strike rank 3. So you add them together, that's 4. And if that big guy has a pole arm, strike rank 0. So he goes strike rank 4. And there's another guy of the same size who just has a dagger, it'd be strike rank 4. And he'd go on rank 8. So the guy with the pole arm acts before the guy with the dagger.
Okay. So
with all other things being equal.
It's a lot of abstract elements blending down into a concrete mathematical thing. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, and then there's surprise. There isn't a separate surprise round or whatever, that's expressed in changing your strike rank. So if you're surprised but you're within 3 meters, it adds 3 to your strike rank. If they're 4 to 9 meters, it adds 1 to their strike rank. So surprise just makes you act a bit later.
Oh, does it actually say meters?
Yes, it says meters and also kilometers.
Freedom units in the game. Anyway, go ahead.
And movements. If you have to close to melee, then that adds to your strike rank as well. So you could be that big guy with the big weapon, but you have to run in, then that guy with the dagger could still go before you.
Okay.
It favors, strike ranks favors someone who's big, dexterous, with a big weapon.
Makes sense.
And who stands there and waits for you to come.
Right.
As I said,
does the Arnie pose, waits for you to charge
basically, over. So there's arguments back and forth about which is more important, but they come down fairly firmly on that side.
Well, and I'm of the mindset, like, occasionally people ask me like, "Ooh, are you going to use the X from this other game system in D&D?" Well, no. It's awesome for it's awesome for its system. That doesn't mean I'm gonna supplant it in here. I like sushi. I don't want sushi on my pizza.
Now, here's an interesting thing. So no action or combination of actions may be performed in one melee round if the total strike rank necessary adds to more than 12. This is purposely correlated to the 12 seconds of a melee round, that a slavish each second equals 1 strike rank point policy should be avoided. It'd be hard to get that in most cases. If you combine, so if you've got a poor strike rank, so a high number, poor strike rank, and you move a lot, you may not be able to get close enough to melee or whatever in that turn. For example, so each 3 meters, so even if you had strike rank of 0, like you're a really big guy, really dexterous, and have a big long weapon, you charge in, but if you have to charge 36 meters, that's strike rank 12, you can get there right at the end of the turn. But if you have to charge 39 meters, you can't quite make it. So what happens is you spend the turn charging, and then the next turn you come in.
Right.
And you hope that people are not firing bows and things at you as you come running up.
Which brings up an interesting point of view. Where does missile fire fall in this combat?
Just depends on what the missile fire strike rank is.
Okay. All right. So there's
the spell or missile is 0. Unprepared spell or missile is 5. Okay, so if the guy's got arrow to bow, that's strike rank 0. If the guy's just got his bow slung on his shoulder and his arrow in his quiver, that's strike rank 5.
Okay.
So in the case of that guy charging 39 meters at him, he would have time. Okay, it'd be strike rank 5. Okay. Pling. And in fact, he could do a second attack at strike rank 10. Because he was pling.
So you scrawny spell slingers aren't any safer in RuneQuest than you are in AD&D with those complex summonings and so on.
No. So, activities. A character not involved in melee can conceivably do a number of things in one round, always keeping in mind that he has only 12 strike rank points to work with. So you can also think of the strike rank points in first edition of RuneQuest as being like action points.
All right.
Thus, he could toss a disruption spell, taking 3 points for a standard dex character. He could then move 9 meters, 3 more points, and take out his bow and arrow, 5 points for readying a weapon. He is then struck because firing the arrow would take another 3 points, and there is only 1 left in the melee round. See, so the spell missile fire is not precisely 0, it's 0, but then what's his dexterity? So if he's got dexterity 19 to 24, he could just go pling, pling, pling. But if he's only got dexterity 1 to 5, each shot costs him 5 strike rank points. Okay. He's just clumsy. He's clumsily trying to, how do I... He's not really...
Draws the arrow, knocks it, realizes he's holding the arrowhead to the string.
Yeah. Yeah, they changed that a little bit in RuneQuest 3rd edition, but this is what in this first one. So this is what I mean about what I was saying earlier about in the first edition, they put in these things which lead to players rorting the system, and they also put in things and decide, look, everyone's ignoring this in play, so let's just take this rule out, or it's needlessly complex in that. So in 3rd edition, they don't have these strike ranks as action points things. It becomes purely initiative.
Right.
Because this would obviously be fairly complicated in play. If you're just doing it as a duel, no problems. And again, that comes back to something I said many live streams ago about your own background. Oh, sorry, it was a blog post. Your own background affecting your game design. So Steve Perrin's background in doing all these duels in SCA will obviously affect this. But then once you sit down at the game table and you've got 6 players there and 12 enemies and stuff, you sort of go, oh, Jesus.
Yeah, my measure of how much fun I think I'm going to have with a given fantasy role-playing game can be solved by solving the 30 goblin problem. In AD&D, 30 goblins for a mid-level party is 1 encounter of many that night. In Rollmaster, that's multiple sessions. Yeah. If you're meeting once a week, that's potentially months to resolve that one thing. And it sounds like under one
in the GURP session that I famously talked about, or that I told you guys about. I wasn't a participant, but friends were there. They opened the campaign with their characters appearing in this cave with 8 gargoyles, and it took them 3 game sessions, 18 combat rounds, which in GURPS is 18 seconds, but it took them 3 sessions, 3 3-hour sessions, which they only had fortnightly. So it took them 6 weeks to dispose of 8 gargoyles.
Damn.
And the fun thing was they were getting experience and improving their skills in between each session too. So I just would have been putting points to whatever was necessary to defeat the damn gargoyles, just so I could finish it. But but 30 goblins is a fair test.
It sounds like this falls probably somewhere between first edition, somewhere between Rollmaster and AD&D, but probably a little further down towards Rollmaster, which hopefully their simple initiative system addressed later.
Yeah, it did. The later editions I consider to be better. Hit location chart. Okay, so this is the hit location we're talking about. You roll a d20 to see where they hit. And as I said, it's you've got your legs, arms, chest, abdomen, and head. And then hit points per location chart. So you look at your total character's hit points, and then they've got that many hit points on that particular location. The total hit points of the various areas can add up to more than the hit points of the character. However, when the character has taken sufficient damage to surpass his hit points, total hit points, he is dead. It is possible that no area of his body may have been completely disabled, but he will still be dead. So you can just batter the poor guy to death. He just dies from an accumulation of bruises.
Oh, man. He just gets tenderized till he's boiling a bag ready.
Pretty much. And then if the hit points are exceeded in any one location, leg, the limb is useless and the character may fall, not doing anything else that round, may fight from the ground during following rounds. Abdomen, both legs are useless and the character must fall, and so on. So, and if they, though you can't receive more than total hit points before dying, you can receive up to twice the hit points on that limb. If you do twice or more damage on that limb, it's gone. It's dead forever. Oh, this might trigger some of our older readers who are familiar with the games that came out in the 80s or the debates that were had online in the 90s. Arm or leg location receives more than twice the hit points available. A modern high-velocity bullet hitting a limb hard enough to put it out of action will probably kill the owner of the limb from hydrostatic shock.
Oh, boy.
No such things, boys and girls. The slower-moving ancient weapons do not have this effect. Therefore, a character cannot take more than twice the possible points of damage in an arm or leg from a blow. Thus, a 2-point arm hit for 5 points will take only 4 points of damage off the total hit points, the remaining points of damage having no effect. However, a character so damaged is functionally incapacitated. He may no longer fight until he is healed. He is in shock. He may heal himself. A limb hit for 6 points more than it can take is severed. So, so they lose it permanently. Head, chest, or abdomen hit for more than 6 available is instant death. Now, again, that's not actually too hard to experience. So total character hit points, if you're like in that 10 to 15 area, you're just going to have, like on the head, 4 or 5. So you just need to receive a total of 10 on your head, and you're kaput.
I can believe
and
it.
As we saw before, like even a short sword will do 1d6 plus 1. So it's not that hard for your character to die permanently.
Now, given you've got about a half an hour left here.
Yeah. But you guys get the idea, right? So there's the weapon skills and all the rest. Right. Oh, they've got a fumble table.
Oh, this is infamous because it gives us a Murphy's rule where it's like a battle with 5,000 axemen in Runequest, yes. Like in the first second, like the opening second of combat, 800 of them will behead themselves.
Yeah, so there's a 79 to 80 critical hit on yourself. Do full damage to yourself, ignoring armor.
Yeah. But I was just going to say, in talking about damage.
So 1 in 50 guys.
1 in 50, good Lord. Given.
There's also a 3% chance of hitting a friend, doing full damage to the friend hit. So don't stand next to anyone. Social distancing, man.
So a tightly packed Romanesque army in RuneQuest, all an enemy general has to do is just stand back, and they'll inflict something upwards of 15% casualties on themselves. And if modern combat theory tells us
around, will do full damage to themselves or a friend.
Yeah. I mean, if modern combat theory tells us anything, is the unit becomes combat ineffective if it loses, what is it, 10, 15% of its
yeah. So in 2 rounds.
Yeah.
In 2 rounds, they'll just batter themselves into uselessness.
Sir, should I order the cavalry in? No, wait. This is going to be hilarious. Watch. No, I was going to say though, and
and there's also a 1% chance blow it. Take 3 rolls and above table and apply them all. Yeah.
What about restorative magic, or is magic big enough that we need to split that off into another stream entirely?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay,
pretty much.
I thought
magic
so.
Magic is a big thing in this.
We'll come back to magic next time. So let's continue on with this. So does armor in this make you harder to hit, or does it absorb damage?
It absorbs damage.
Yeah,
so missile weapons. Okay, so armor. Armor is the last barrier between the character and the oncoming weapon. Armor absorbs damage from weapons and keeps the character intact, hopefully. Different hit locations may wear different forms of armor. So they've got heavy leather, queer bully, which is your shaped or boiled leather armor. You know, like they like showing it on old Roman soldiers and things like that. It was like Gladiator, Russell Crowe. You know, he had the brown leather armor with the horse.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's your queer bully. Ringmail, scale, chainmail, brigandine, and plate. And they've got strength. Yeah, they've got a minimum strength that you need to stomp around in it with. And it absorbs, well, just like padded armor, like your padded jack is like 1 point. And queer bully is 3 points.
Okay.
Ringmail 4, all the way up to plate 6. So plate 6, like if you got plate, that short sword +1. You know, the short sword doing 1d6 1 is just going to go ding, 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 except 1 in 6 times it'll do 1 point of damage. But of course, plate across your whole body is going to be expensive, and it's going to be hideously expensive and heavy as well.
And I'm guessing it moves your attack value up, right?
Strike rank.
Strike rank, thank you.
Encumbrance. For those who like encumbrance rules, it says. So even in 1978, there were people who are going, no. This is what the shield is worth in things. See chapter 3. Anyway, so yeah, it just slows you down, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So armor stops things. So that's like I said. There's only 2 basic ways of handling armor in game set systems. That either makes you harder to hit or it absorbs damage. And D&D, it makes you harder to hit, and a Runequest, it absorbs damage. And then more of Rook Saga, Rumble in the Rubble. And fights a baboon.
Apes, Kyle.
Yes, it is. Rook joined a mercenary company and did well, earning enough loot to pay for a ringmail hauberk, an open helm, and plate armor and leg armor. Under the ringmail, he has a padding hauberk worth 2 more points of protection. As part of his training, he has 35% use of large shield and 30% use of short sword. He is also 30% capable with a spear used one-handed. At this time, he is guarding the horses for a group of adventurers attempting the Blind King's palace in the Pavas rubble. His companion in this duty is Horus the Hairy, a somewhat more knowledgeable fighter who also chose not to go into the palace. The two are engaged in idle conversation, lulled into carelessness by lack of activity, when there is a sudden screech and Horus goes flying. He has been hit from behind by a baboon. The baboon is a common member of the breed, and having successfully sneaked up on the two, rolled 40 on an attack roll. Ordinarily, this would not be enough, but the attack from behind adds 20% to an attack, and the blow was successful. The blow did 9 points of damage to Horus's left arm, which went through the 3 points of queer bully armor and did 6 points of damage to the arm. Horus has 3-point arms, so the blow was enough to functionally incapacitate him. He falls in a heap out of the fight. "Give horse," hisses the baboon in a reasonable approximation of Pavis trade talk. Rurik, whose pay depends on seeing that this doesn't happen, says nothing as he advances to the attack. They go on like this, and they have a back and forth, and they hurt themselves or hurt the baboon, and says the baboon realizes that horse meat will probably not be on his diet today. It begins to back away, but Rurik, being young and impetuous, presses his attack. Turning, the baboon tries to get away. Turning, the baboon tries to get away. Rurik's attack roll misses. The baboon scrambles away at his movement rate of 10, while Rurik soothes the horses and then helps Horus up. So, yeah. Baboons! See, even in 1978, they knew this.
They knew the danger of the ape cult with their blood-curdling cries of ook, ook, they fall upon you.
Yep.
A question from Damien. Does custom-fitted armor lower encumbrance in RuneQuest?
Not in first edition.
Well, there you have it, Damien. Not in first edition.
Nor in third, no.
Okay. You know, I find it kind of interesting, and I was going to mention this early on. Was third where they sold it off to Avalon Hill?
Yep.
Okay. So Avalon Hill is owned by Hasbro.
The little... We can remove this.
Okay.
Stop sharing. We can remove this.
There we go.
You can see Avalon Hill is on the side there.
Yes. Avalon Hill is, of course, owned by Hasbro now, and they're just, an impressum just when they want to republish those occasionally. So RuneQuest is effectively published by the same company that publishes Dungeons and Dragons, at least for that edition.
Yes, Michael Connor, GURPS armor in third and earlier editions did both, making you harder to hit and reducing damage. And in fourth edition, they changed that so that it just reduces damage. I think I mentioned as early as just last week, there was it led to the strange thing that, so you'd roll to hit, and then you'd roll for hit location, and you could find that actually you didn't hit after all. So say a guy has plate van braces, he's got no other armor on. You roll to hit, you hit just by one, but the plate van braces have I think they call it a point defense or something, of 3 or whatever. So it turns out because you hit him on the plate van braces, you actually didn't hit, it just bounced off.
So I'm not sure what's worse, 5th edition's damage on a miss or GURPS's no damage on a hit.
So, yeah, it kind of frustrated players, and it didn't give any more effect than just reducing damage because, okay, you hit him on the arm where he's got plate van braces. Okay, so we do less damage. The player finds that quite reasonable, whereas the player finds it frustrating to roll to hit, succeed, roll for hit location, and then find they've actually failed. We don't need extra rolls to find out that we failed anyway. That's just tedious. So, yeah, and this led to a wonderful incident where one player he tried to create the sort of the dexterous rapier kind of character, your Zorro kind of dude.
And for the YouTube algorithm, that's rapier. That's the skinny sword.
And he hit the guy, and he hit him on the arm or leg, I can't remember which. And he found exactly that in fact he hadn't hit because of the armor. And the player was so angry, Tom was so angry, that he got up and he stormed out of the game session. And he went outside. And then he came back in a couple minutes later because it was actually his house. So he went outside. He went outside and sat in his car, and then realized he had nowhere to drive to because it was...
I'm going home. Oh, wait, I'm already here.
So he came back inside, and but 4th edition made it just a damage reduction. Because it's one of those, like I said, needless complexities. It just persisted in GURPS all the way up to 3rd edition, whereas things like having the strike ranks where they're effectively action points. That was a needless complexity of first and second edition a Runequest, which, as I've said, are effectively the same edition, which was got rid of by third edition.
Right on.
So most games seem to have done that. If they go into multiple editions, they start with excessive complexity, and then they see where players wrought the system, and they see where we could cut something and still get the same effect. Yes, the rapier player should have used an stock player built for armor piercing. I don't know if it was listed in third edition. I'm sure there was a splat book for it because they had endless splat books. The game master used to have an army duffel bag, and he carried books, and there were at least 30 of them in there. and he never brought out more than one. So
yeah,
but he carried them all with him the whole time.
he was powerlifting every game night.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. I remember it's been many years, but I ran just a gargantuan mega dungeon at a convention, and I took every piece of Dwarven Forge I have, and folks have seen, I've shown the camera, it's 3 of their normal old school boxes tall and the entire width of my garage full. And by the end of the night doing the loadout, I was pouring. So each one of those boxes is like 8 pounds, okay, well, it's just a box here, a box there. Well, no, it's dozens of them. I was getting a pretty good workout for courtesy of Stefan Borcorny and co.
So in non-role-playing game related news, mail call for me, I got this book recently from my kids, St. George and the Dragon.
Oh, how wonderful.
Hodges. Well, I just heard about somebody mentioned it on Twitter, and they shared some of the art. So it's a retelling of, obviously, St. George slaying the dragon.
Mm-hmm.
But the art is just magnificent. So this is St. George going along with his lady, and the dwarf carrying the food behind him.
Let me see. I'm going to see if I can I? No. One more. I can't. I'm trying to put you as the focus there, but that's beautiful, dude. That is to die for. Who did those? Who's the illustrator there?
So there's the text, and you can see around the edges they've got wonderful stuff as well.
Oh, that is
so look out for St. George and the Dragon. So it's now it's a retelling of Edmund Spenser from the 16th century's The Fairy Queen. And you'll hear that. I'll compare some of the text. The writer is Margaret Hodges, illustrated by Trina Shart Hyman.
Well, it is lovely artwork in that.
In the days when monsters and giants and fairy folk lived in England, a noble knight was riding across a plain. He wore heavy armor and carried an ancient silver shield marked with a red cross. It was dented with the blows of many battles fought long ago by other brave knights. The Red Cross Knight had never yet faced a foe and did not even know his name or where he had been born. But now he was bound on a great adventure, sent by the Queen of the Fairies to try his young strength against a deadly enemy, a dragon grim and horrible. Beside him, on a little white donkey, rode a princess leading a white lamb, and behind her came a dwarf carrying a small bundle of food. The lady's lovely face was veiled, and her shoulders were covered with a black cloak, as if she had a hidden sorrow in her heart. Her name was Una. Now, as I said, it's based on Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen, which is based on all these old English myths and legends. So I'll compare that with my old poetry book, where it says, a gentle knight was pricking on the plain. So pricking, that sounds funny to us, but it's actually referring to the way the horse So those of you who've seen any equestrian events, even a little bit, have seen that the horses do that sort of thing with their feet. So that's what it means by pricking, the horse going on.
Okay.
A gentle knight was pricking on the plain, clad in mighty arms and silver shield, wherein old dints of deep wounds did remain, the cruel marks of many a bloody field. Yet arms till that time did he never wield, his angry steed did chide his foaming bit, as much disdaining to the curb to yield. Full jolly knight he seemed, and fair did sit, as one for knightly jousts and fierce encounters fit. And it goes on like that. So, and I think she's rendered the poem fairly well without making it like into a poem. And like when they meet the dragon, I had to break the story into 2 days for my kids, and before they met the dragon and after, so I wouldn't leave them with the dragon fight before they went to bed. You know. So she uses a lot of alliteration, which is a nice touch too. Probably most won't know. So the poetry that we tend to like nowadays has rhyme. The poetry of Old English, including that of the famous Beowulf saga, didn't use rhyme, but it used alliteration a lot. And there were particular patterns that they used with it, which I won't go into. But she's, in her prose, has brought back a lot of alliteration and a lot of strong adverbs. It's very well constructed. Then they heard a hideous roaring that filled the air with terror and seemed to shake the ground. The dreadful dragon lay stretched on the sunny side of a great hill, like a great hill himself. And when he saw the knight's armor glistening in the sunlight, he came eagerly to do battle. The knight bade his lady stand apart, out of danger, to watch the fight, while the beast drew near, half flying, half running. His great size made a wide shadow under his huge body, as a mountain casts a shadow on a valley. He reared high, monstrous, horrible and vast, armed all over with scales of brass, fitted so closely that no sword or spear could pierce them. They clashed with every movement. The dragon's wings stretched out like 2 sails when the wind fills them. The clouds fled before him. His huge, long tail, speckled red and black, wound in 100 folds over his scaly back and swept the land behind him for almost half a mile. In his tail's end, 2 sharp stings were fixed, but sharper still were his cruel claws. Whatever he touched or drew within those claws was in deadly danger. His head was more hideous than tongue can tell, for his deep jaws gaped wide, showing 3 rows of iron teeth ready to devour his prey. A cloud of smothering smoke and burning sulphur poured from his throat, filling the air with its stench. His blazing eyes, flaming with rage, glared out from deep in his head. So he came forward toward the knight, raising his speckled breast, clashing his scales as he leapt to greet his newest victim. I don't know about you, but I'm scared.
That I tell you what, if I could describe a dragon like that in my games, I'd have my players ready to turn tail and run. That is some fine prose. That I tip my hat for.
It's good. So for those of you who have children or nephews and nieces, grandchildren or whatever, that's well worth going. And it digs right into the history of our Western culture, because a lot of our Western culture is based on really England. So St. George and the Dragon, and certainly digs into the history of D&D. It is, after all, Dungeons and Dragons.
Indeed. Indeed. I was on that horse last night. I was talking about, those DMs who just strip the Dungeons and the Dragons out of D&D, man, what are you even here for?
Yeah. So monsters should be monstrous. They don't necessarily have to be supernatural, but perhaps there should be some doubt as to whether or not they are supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for the players to be unsure.
Right.
Like I once had a monster which the players thought was a werewolf. It was actually a crazed hermit who had a wolf's head and skin on his body.
I like that.
But when they were exploring these old Roman ruins that had sort of been covered over and made into a cave, and they went down into the darkness with their flickering torches, and there'd been rumors like some animals had been torn up recently and some people and so on, and they went down into the darkness and they smelt a dog stench, that smell of wet dog, and then from the back of the dark wet space they heard this low growl, and they saw the glint of the eyes glinted across them from their torches, and that they were scared.
It's good stuff, man. It's damn fine stuff.
So so I think this book, along with the Dungeon Master's Guide, really teaches us the importance of words and of crafting stuff. As you've commented, sadly, recently, nowadays, so much of everything is ironic and sarcastic. And it's very easy. It's very easy humor for us in game session. It's why I've never run a successful Call of Cthulhu campaign, because like you spend all this time building up dramatic tension, and then somebody cracks a fart joke or something.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's hard to do. I've actually found that maybe it's just where my particular talents lie, not in the modern or pseudo-modern horror, but in the more ancient things.
Mm-hmm.
But I've managed to be able to do that, to get that fear, that kind of sense of wonder and the supernatural in Dungeons and Dragons and in similar games like Runequest, that I haven't managed to do in modern horror. People have seemed less likely to just make it ironic and sarcastic.
Yeah.
People have taken more sincerely. So being able to craft words and reading the Dungeon Master's Guide and trying to make sense of it makes us better at crafting words ourselves, I think.
It does. There's one thing I want to touch on, and I don't want to stretch your time out too much, but you were talking about alliteration, and the author of that book, crafted it so well. And I mean this in a complimentary way, it brought one of my favorite scenes out of The Lord of the Rings, which I'm currently rereading, to mind. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because, first of all, I don't do it as well as you. And second of all, again,
I've got more recent practice reading to children. So.
But it's after Éomer finds Éowyn on the Pelennor Fields when she is solo. Well, no, she didn't solo. She and Mary took down the Witch King. But Tolkien's alliteration in that scene is it's great. And I start here with a fey mood took him. Éowyn, Éowyn, he cried at last. Éowyn, how come you here? What madness or deviltry is this? Death, 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 death take us all. And it's just so, and then you've got which they use at the beginning of the battle in the film, but it's when Éomer calls out, over the fields rang his clear voice calling death, ride to ruin and the world's ending. You just love that alliteration, man.
Yeah. It works well. So like I said, the Old English poems had that, and they also had what was called Kennings. They were essentially metaphors, but metaphors that you had to think about a little bit. So things like, they went upon the Wales Road. The Wales Road is the sea. And it makes sense too when you're thinking of how they would have been presented, that there would be, as they call them, a scop. In the Old Saxon called a scop, but a bard, who'd be in the mead hall, perhaps with a harp or whatever, or with someone accompanying him on a flute or a drum or something, and performing and telling that story and doing the voices and having the dramatic pauses and all the rest. But he'd put the Kennings in, I believe, because it would help the audience. They're not just passively listening.
Mm-hmm.
They have to think, the whale road. What's that? Oh, of course, the sea. So it was like a little mini riddle, not a full-on riddle that you have to think about for half an hour or a day or something, but a kind of a mini riddle that makes you listen a little bit more carefully, and they go, of course. And it brings to mind images. So it's not quite a metaphor. They call it a kenning. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's not present in this sort of thing, but right. it is nonetheless part of that long tradition. And I think it's good to look back on those traditions, and it's good to look back on the history that informed so much of our fantasy literature and our role-playing games and so on. It enriches the experience.
It really is, and
particularly
really
for game masters. Particularly for game masters, because the interesting thing is that even if the players don't know, they know, because they grew up in this culture. So there's so much stuff that people absorbed, ideas of what is a hero. You know, there's that man, he bade her stand apart. You know, I'm about to fight a dragon, just stand aside. Mm-hmm. That idea that the man goes forth into danger while the woman stands aside, that's a pretty ancient idea. And, you know, nowadays we have women joining the army and joining the infantry and that, and they should be able to. Mm-hmm. But there's still that idea. You know, if the house is burning down and the parents are outside with one of the kids and another kid's inside, the man's going to go back in the burning house. Yeah. Not the woman. So it's still very much a part of our culture. I mean, that doesn't mean women wouldn't sacrifice them. No, the woman's going in. If it's necessary, the woman's going in. She's going to do that. She's a mother. But because that's so much still part of our culture, and there are so many other little things. So if the game master can bring some of these elements into it and try to describe things more evocatively and so on, just put these little touches of history and myth and so on into it and plagiarize ruthlessly.
Yes. And it's what,
it will make it a richer experience for players.
You talk about that sort of thing. I mean, that is what gives such incredible emotional impact to Éowyn facing the Witch King.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Amer's reaction is, what madness or deviltry is this? How are you here? How are you here on the battlefield? And the scene before, I mean, which, again, Jackson's movie is okay, but I think he robs it. He just drains it of all the poetry when, you know, she says, "But no living man am I. You look upon a woman, Éowyn I am, Éomen's daughter. You stand between me and my lord and kin. Be gone if you be not deathless, for living or dark undead, I will smite you if you touch him." I mean, that's coming from that's got to be blowing the Witch King's mind at that point, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's such a great scene.
Yeah, and so the women don't usually fight makes it all the more powerful when she does. It makes her all the more courageous, all the more somebody to be respected and to be thought of. So, you know, that the one moment of courage that she has will stand in legend far longer than the 1,000 moments of courage that other guys had. You know, because it's so remarkable. Yeah, so if we can reach back in history and myth and legend and bring a little bit of that to the game table, players will know and recognize more than we think and more than they realize.
Yes. Yes, without a doubt, that's true. One for both our viewers, because I've talked about this a lot, and for you, Kyle, if I haven't brought this up to you, but I think I have. The King of Elfland's Daughter by Lord Dunsany. I think you can find it for free online. It's a hell of a good fantasy read. It is really, really quite good, and it does bear some influence on D&D. I mean, the main character, to have a magic sword made, goes to a witch, and she's like, well, lightning struck up on the hill back in October. Go harvest me some of the lightning bolts that are in the ground. You know, and she brings him, or he brings her lightning bolts to make into a magic sword. But I think you and the kids might like that one, and I think you folks out in the audience would enjoy that if you haven't seen it or haven't read it. Rather, is The King of Elfland's Daughter.
And so, yeah, you can do that sort of work in D&D or in Runequest.
Just so.
Various editions as well.
Just so. Well, I know you need to skedaddle. I don't want to leave Zach hanging out by himself if he's under the weather. So, the one
well, I'm going to, speaking of going back in history, I'm going to go and after show him, I got Crusader Kings 3 on the PlayStation. It finally came out. Yesterday I tried it out and I played King Alfred. First he was Earl Alfred, then his brother died, so he became King Alfred of Wessex. And he was off helping Mercia fight off the Danes, and while his army was off helping Mercia, the Vikings raided the southern coast, and I got this message: your wife Elswith was captured. And I thought, oh damn, I'll have to ransom her back. And then there comes a message from the Viking, the Viking Halfdan, the White, and Halfdan says, "Aha! I have taken your wife as my concubine." I was like, damn it.
Game pulled punches.
Yeah, it didn't pull any punches. But the thing is, she was pregnant with my child. So my child, so he makes her his concubine. So she's floating around in his court as his concubine. But my child is in the dungeon. My child Margaret daughter's in the dungeon. So eventually I ransomed back the daughter. And I was like, I've got to get revenge. But he was too far away for me to go and fight. But then it comes up, oh, she's divorced you and she's converted to the Viking religion. And I thought, well, I couldn't save her from Viking raiders. I probably don't blame her for divorcing me. But I then, I like, damn it. So I made a plot to go and have him assassinated in revenge. But that caused, your character has traits. You play whoever's the head of the house at the time. So when Alfred dies, you play his son, kind of thing. And he had all these traits of being honest and just and so on. So because I was having him plot somebody's murder, it called him stressed. He gets stressed. He starts becoming a less effective leader because he's like, oh. But at the same time, like if your nature was to be really dishonest and scheming and backstabbing, and you had your character be nice to people and be decent, that would also cause them stress and they become a less effective leader. So the historical King Alfred is backstabbing people, and the murder plot failed. So then I realized you can actually try to seduce any random woman that's in the world, all man. So he seduced her and brought her to his court. But by that time he'd remarried, so then he was legitimizing his bastards with Elswith. Making his new wife angry. So it's greatly historically diverged from the history, whatever. But I can go back and I can show my son this history because they've made a big attempt to make it all historical. Obviously, once the game starts in play, it becomes completely unhistorical. But they've made a big attempt, so I can tell him more about the history of the world at that time, and how it fits in with things like that.
Right on.
All right, so I'll head off, guys.
Okay, and, Kyle, thank you. Next week, RuneQuest Magic, yeah?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right. I'd like to see how a different magic system works, and I think our audience would too. So next week, assuming that, I'm not bedridden and on drip IV from sitting here streaming for 12 hours nonstop. So have a good one, Kyle. Best wishes to Zach. Hope he feels better soon.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Peace. All right. And as always, I'm going to take these studio cans off because I'm going to be wearing those bad boys, from now or Saturday for 12 hours nonstop. But anyway, yeah, a lot of fun hearing about RuneQuest and everything. So here's, if you missed me blubbering and going on like a madman earlier this afternoon, here is what's going on. First of all, I just want to say I checked the metrics just before the show started. We're actually at 1,004 subs, so like 3 other people. So the magic is working already, sort of getting bumped up in the algorithm. Passerby, I don't know. I honestly don't know if the concubine's name was Jada. I just got that. Literally, as I said that, I just got that. Keep my wife's name out of thy mouth. Stab. Anyway, but so coming up soon is Subscribe Star. Hopefully they'll authorize me for Subscribe Star usage, and those of you that want to donate on the show. I can't say for sure if I'll get monetized on YouTube. I hope so, but if that happens, yes, I can turn on super chats and people can if you want to super chat, you can. No one has to. Tomorrow evening, the next video for patrons drops, so keep your eye out for that, patrons. Let's see what else. Saturday I will be locked in and ripping the knob off. Like the old radio ads, lock it in and rip the knob off. So Saturday we got a lot of people. The only schedule I've got at this point, the only 100% for sure is going to be here at a certain time, is Bards of Greyhawk will be doing a video premiere at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard. And then so 11. Well, I think we'll do it at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard, because at 11 I will be playing the interview with Gary Gygax that I did back in 2002. So we will round it out as we did last year with the Gary Gygax interview. It'll give me a chance to, stretch my legs and decompress a little bit. But all folks are going to be popping into the stream all day long before that. Friends of mine, guests I've had on the show, people people you might not know. Ty Beard will be here. Now, it's not just to have Ty on the show, although that's reason enough, but Ty is also a war games designer. He designed the game of Modern Armored Combat and others too, which we'll talk to him about. But the game is called A Fistful of Toes. Not toes, the phalanges on the end of your feet, tube launched, optically guided, wire controlled. It's a missile, anti-tank missile. But he designed that, which I played, and I didn't realize that was the same Ty Beard when I caught him first over on Nick Ricada's streams. So Ty is going to be here. I hope that Darlene the artist will be able to stop in and say hello. I also hope Alan Hammock will be here. They said, or Alan at least said, he would have to see what his schedule is like. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope that they can be here. Raised on D&D, Nick from Raised on D&D will be here. Be popping in. When I say here, again, he could just pop in and say, hey, congrats, that's awesome, see ya, bye. So don't feel like, oh, well, they're going to be there for 5 hours, so I can just, So yeah, we've got a pretty full buffet of information. Now, I do want to point something out. If you're listening, if you're watching over on Facebook, and I will post up about this, I could not set the videos to start, the streams to start at separate times. Facebook users will have to come back over and watch on YouTube if you want to catch the last 4 hours or so of the show. Facebook will automatically cut me off at 8 hours. I can't do anything about that. I can barely figure out how to get Facebook to start to start allowing me to stream in 1080p. So I can't really control when Facebook will stop. 2 nights ago, Facebook just literally went click. I'm turning off your stream after 7 minutes. I don't know why. I didn't shut anything. I didn't close any tabs. I didn't click on anything. Always keep the Facebook tab open. So if you guys say anything to me, if you guys interact with me over on Facebook, my fans on Facebook, then I see it. Because I always want to be true, because that's where things began, was over on Facebook. So, you know, it's my hope that that if there's folks over on Facebook, that they'll migrate over and watch here on YouTube. I mean, I'm not going to put a gun in anybody's head. And, I've had people tell me, I'm so glad you stream on Facebook. I'm not getting a Google account. I'm not having anything to do with Google, because your personal data is so safe on Facebook. But I understand you don't want one more probe up where the sun doesn't shine. So they won't come and watch because they can't interact with me. So they rarely and occasionally watch and interact over on Facebook. But again, Facebook doesn't let me stream for more than 8 hours, and I'm doing this for 12 hours so I can have lots of guests on and I can talk about lots of stuff. Now, at some point in there, I will have to get up. I will and stretch my legs and move around and walk the dog and so on. I will try and have some filler stuff ready for those times, so you're not just staring at the wall behind me. But it'll be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you're looking forward to it. But with that said, I think Odyssey stream, I don't know. I could add Odyssey as a service if they allow RTMP. I could certainly add Odyssey. I'll look into it. I'm not averse to anything, guys. I mean, as long as it's not, as long as it's not completely wacko and something that's gonna upset people that I'm doing. But yeah, I can look into Odyssey, sure. So with that said, I think I'm probably going to call it an evening. I need to eat some dinner. That's cool, Michael Connor. I will check it out. I will look into it. Yeah, I'm going to go grab a bite to eat, guys. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for making 1,000 subs happen. And before I go, first of all, if you want to support the show, right now, we do have Patreon, and you can support on Patreon. It's right there. And also, I want to, as my last act, the last act of a desperate man, I want to thank Digital Discord, Joshua Garlock, Lord Corion, Ricky Maru, Mobius, Kevin Reynolds, Doomsword Deathmaster, Mark Simpson, Damien247, James F. Keck, William Smith, The Dungeon Minister, Manny Wall, Mark Corey, Kevin Wood, and Todd Sharp. They all contribute to the show, and I really, really appreciate it. But I appreciate everything everybody does. We are at 1,003 or 1,004. I don't know how many. I can't remember. but we're at over 1,000 subs now. I now reach over 1,000 people per stream. And it's because of you guys. You guys have put the word out there. So I will see you tomorrow evening. We'll just talk about stuff. I'll find something fun to discuss then. And then, of course, Friday night, we have first edition Gamma World. Find out what's up with the Gamma World gang. Have a great evening, everyone. I'll talk to you later. Peace.